lived in Idaho for a couple years when I was 18, I think when I was 18 to 20, off and on. I did a lot of hiking. A lot of hiking over there. It's kind of crazy because now thinking back on it, I didn't realize how active I always was in the wilderness or whatever. But I used to go hike up in those hills in the back area over there because I was just curious, growing up in the Northwest and then being over somewhere like that. And, there's a lot of white-tailed deer and there's all these different things, different scenery than what I grew up in. I just loved it when I was there. I was homesick a lot, but I loved being there. But one of the guys told me one time, he was like, "Man, what are you doing hiking up in those hills?" I said, "I don't know. I just like going up there." I said, and he kind of shook his head like I was crazy or something, and I always wondered why, he never did say anything. I didn't realize that for them to talk about it, they're really superstitious about talking about even to mention Sasquatch or anything. One of the things they believe, it invites them around. So if you talk about it more, it'll bring them to your area. Or
hopefully this podcast does that.
Yeah.
For me and Edge. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, but they also believe with seeing it can bring bad luck. So I didn't know that. So when I was there, I was talking about it all the time, and I was wondering why some of them guys would kind of like give me dirty looks or like almost like they were like shrugging me off, or they didn't, I took it personal. But then one of the other guys pulled me to the side and he says, "Yeah, you're not supposed to talk about it. You're not even supposed to mention it. But if you see one right now, you can talk about it, but you're not supposed to like this, kind of like how we're just talking about this, that they don't like doing that." But anyway, so I didn't know that. That's why that guy was asking me why I was hiking up in those hills. Well, I'm just kind of giving a little bit of a background of the area. And so rolling hills, grass, not very much trees. In this particular area of where Lapwai Valley is, there's like they almost look like apple trees or something. I don't even know what they are. They're just small little trees that grow like in the ravines and stuff. But this area, there's a little bit of farm area, like a couple of farms right around that area. And I was there. We were having a family picnic, like a potluck style, where everybody brings a dish. And it was in the evening time, in the summertime. Sun was almost starting to go down, but it was still pretty bright out. Everybody was starting to dish up their food. I remember I was, they had like these long tables set up with a lot of good food there. So I was like walking around looking at what kind of food I want to eat. And then one of the ladies that was actually my wife's cousin, she started screaming at the top of her lungs, hysterically screaming. And she was saying, "Who's a Sasquatch?" But she was like screaming like really, really loud. And I actually couldn't even understand what she was saying. I thought she was having a nervous breakdown or something. So I was trying to avoid it. I was like kind of turning my back away from her, and I was trying to I was like, man, I don't know what's going on with her, but like somebody needs to go check on her or something, because she's just standing over there. All these people are around getting, a family event, and she's like screaming at the top of her lungs.
Yeah. Well,
she's pointing up into the hill, and she's saying, "There's a Sasquatch!" She kept screaming over and on. Finally, one of the guys goes over and kind of settles her down a little bit. And he's saying, what's the matter? What are you doing? And then trying to calm her down. And then I could hear him say, "Oh yeah, I see it." So that got my curiosity. So I walked over there and I was like, "What are you guys looking at?" And they're pointing up into the hill. And I couldn't see nothing at first. I was looking up there. I said, I said, "I don't see." I said, "Yeah, you see it right there. There's a I don't remember if they called it a Sasquatch or they say, "There it is, it's right there." She was saying Sasquatch. So
Yeah.
I was looking and I couldn't see anything, and the guy points his finger. He says, "Come over here and look down where my finger's pointing." So I walk over beside him and I look down his arm. I look right down, to like looking down a gun or something. I'm looking down his right where he's pointing at. And that it started moving along that hillside. Well, as soon as it started moving, my eyes locked in on it and I could see it. And it walked along the edge of the hill, and then it kind of turned and it looked over. But it was one of the weirdest things was it was like for a second, I locked eyes with that thing and it looked at me. And this is from like 1,000 yards away. And so I always thought, if there was an elk or a deer or something that was standing on that hill, I don't know if I would have been able to see its eyes like that, the way it stopped and it looked at me. And then it turned and it started walking away. But
so this thing was pretty good size. I mean, you said that you could see the eyes and stuff from that distance, and if it had been an elk, you probably would not have. And as we know, elks, I mean, they're huge. So what you saw was definitely bigger than an elk, you're saying.
Oh my! Well, yeah. See, it was it was big, and I could kind of make out its. I could see it was really muscular, you could kind of see like its arms and everything. I don't know. It's just it was like once my eyes zeroed in on it, I could see like different features and different things of the way that it actually looked. And the head had to be huge if I could see its eyes from that far away. That's something I always, that particular hill in that area, there's during football season, the high school team runs that hill for conditioning because it's pretty steep and it goes up. Well, there's a water tower up there, a big water tower that sits up on the left side of that, but right where that area is where it walked at, there's kind of a ravine. So it kind of cut back towards that ravine, but it's the same steepness as that where they do their conditioning at. And so we sit there and we watched it walk all the way up that hill. It was probably I would say honestly, it was probably like 3 minutes of watching this thing. Which that's a long time. I mean, if you see something for 10 seconds, you'd be happy to see something. You'd be fortunate or not fortunate, however you look at it. But to see something for 3 minutes is. But what made it more, I guess, the amount of time that it took from where that thing was standing to get to 3 minutes till it got to the peak of that hill. And we watched it walk over the hill. Right where it's right. Anyways, if any human tried to go and start from that position and you hit a stopwatch or whatever and timed somebody, there's no way humanly possible that a person could walk up that hill, let alone run up that hill in 3 minutes. And that thing never looked like it was running at any particular time. It was walking fast. But, you know, another thing is where those certain trees that are growing in that area, I've been up around those trees, and the canopy is like maybe 8 or 10 feet. Maybe, you know, it's like the limbs are like sit up off the ground pretty high. And you could actually see that thing kind of duck its head, certain parts where you would see it duck underneath those limbs. And so that was just like pretty freaky, actually, to think that, you know, that thing, I always thought, well, even if it was 8 feet and he was ducking, his head would have had to be 10 feet or 9 or 10 feet. But if it was bigger, you know, he would have had to really, I don't know. That thing had to have been way, way bigger than, you know, and so with all those, if I sent you the interview, her name is Tessie. She doesn't mind me talking about it because she's already went public with her story. She put her story out in public, so she's not like, she's done interviews for books and everything, but
yeah, that's right. You sent me the article. It is a public story.
Yeah, so she doesn't go into as much details as what I'm. Of course, her encounter was different than mine, even though we were at the same place in the same time. You know, the way she perceived everything, because they actually hopped in the truck and they took off. I was going to jump in the truck, but at the last minute, I decided not to jump in the back of the truck. It was a Toyota. So they jumped. There was 3 of them that jumped in the truck and they drove. So if you know right where that hill is, there's a road that goes in the middle of that, and you can drive up that. It only takes a few minutes from where we were at to drive up to that road and to get where you could basically intercept where we knew he was going to walk on the other side of that.
Yeah.
Well, in her interview, she says that they started to go, but they got scared and they didn't go. But wow. The guy who was driving the truck, he was my brother-in-law. He told me that they did drive up there. And he looked at it through his scope. He brought his gun and he pulled out his gun and he looked at it down his scope. And he said the face was really ugly, kind of scary, really scary. His face, when he came back, he was pale, like he looked like he had seen a ghost or something. You know, I mean, so he was really shook up from whatever he seen, and they didn't want to admit to nobody that. You know, that's why when she does her interview, she said we went up there, but we got scared and we didn't go look at it. But she didn't want to tell people that they did look at it. But
yeah,
I know from talking to my brother-in-law that, you know, I don't know, maybe she turned her head or something and maybe got scared and didn't look, but because they would have been closer. But another thing that my brother-in-law said is that from the time that they drove down there, that it had already went down the other side of a ravine and was walking back up the other side of that hill by the time they drove up there. So that just gives you, you know, that thing was moving pretty fast. I mean, it's during that time, I think this was in 92 when I seen that. I always thought it was later on, like 94 or something, or 95, or, you know, I don't know. Time kind of has a weird way. I just thought it was strange for me being from Quinault and going over to Idaho to actually see, you know, something like that. Where, you know, that particular time when we seen that one, there was another group of people. So right in the middle of town, which is like maybe a half mile away from right where we were at. They called in. So the lady that I was, the lady who was screaming, the one I thought was having a nervous breakdown, she called the cops. I don't know why she called the cops, but she called. I'll tell you why she called the cops in a minute. But the other people in the middle of town called the cops basically at the same time and reported seeing a Sasquatch up on the hill. Well, I guess when you have two sightings like that simultaneously, it makes it to where the law enforcement has to act upon it because it's,
Right.
different.
They have to go out and investigate.
Yeah, they have to go investigate because there's two separate parties, not just somebody crazy saying they've seen something.
If it's a Sasquatch, there's not really a lot they can do about it, right? But they probably go out because, if there's like somebody like a prankster out there, then you obviously don't want somebody getting hurt. Because there have been people who wore ghillie suits before and pretended to be Sasquatch and got shot, right? So that's why I could definitely see them going out one way or another, whether it's real or to investigate whether it's someone out there playing games.
Yeah, I asked Tess one time. I asked her, "Why did you call the cops?" I said, "What did you think the cops were going to do?" And
yeah,
she told me. She said, if you go back, right, and look at where we spotted that at, her house where she lives at is only about maybe 200 or 300 yards up that hill from where her house is, because we were off over at a different location from where we've seen it at. But I drove over to her house. She told me, "Come over to my house and look at where we've seen that at." And so when I drove over to her house, it's just like right up. She said, "Yeah, it's just right up that hill." She said, "I don't know if that thing is going to come down and she had younger kids. They're growing up now, but she says, I don't know if that thing is going to come mess with my kids or whatever, but I guess, I don't know that. I guess the cops can shoot at it. I don't know what she called the cop just for her own mental safety, or that she feels more safe, I guess. But yeah, those are just little details, that I think, go back and, I kind of don't mind if people go and look it up online. It's Lapway, Idaho, 1992 Sasquatch sighting. My name isn't mentioned in there, but I was the other. She says there was her and like 3 other people, or there was actually more people, but like I say, a lot of them don't want to admit that they seen it. There was 3 of us that would talk about it.
I was just gonna thank you for coming on and sharing your stories, and I really appreciate the time, and thank you for just sharing. It takes a lot to come on sometimes as eyewitness, especially put yourself out there like that. So those are and then after our talks, I have no doubt that you saw Sasquatches or had experiences growing up with Sasquatch, especially coming from Taholah and that whole area. I mean, I know they're there, right? So yeah, thank you for coming on the show, and maybe when we have a little more time, maybe later on in the future, we'd like to get you back on one day to tell us some more of your experiences.